Hello there, welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to look at something of a weird thing that popped up to me when we got to see a flash of a Section 31 ship in the 24th century. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a backstory of that vessel and also of the agency in and of itself, and try to come to a conclusion about this ship. For those of you who aren't aware, Section 31 is a covert intelligence agency and black ops organization within the United Federation of Planets. It splintered off from Starfleet but was part of its original charter. At some points in its history, particularly in the early to mid 23rd century, it was somewhat answerable, at least with some level of transparency, to Starfleet Command, although the level of that is easily debatable. The organization traces its origins to before the founding of the United Federation of Planets to the early Earth Starfleet, but it very rapidly splintered off and became its own organization. Now, it's always been implied and quite frankly fairly obvious that it was utilizing its own ships on some level from the first re-emergence of the agency when we saw Director Sloan first appear in Dr. Julian Bashir's quarters. It's quite clear he wasn't simply skulking around the station somewhere, and he must have arrived via his own mode of transportation, his own starship of some kind. What form that took isn't known in any way, shape or form. We never saw it. But he was clearly getting on and off the station somehow, and he wasn't using civilian transports. In the 23rd century, Section 31 did use a multitude of larger, more impressive starships, but these were all supposedly destroyed when the organization was dismantled. It obviously, again, was not dismantled. But that brings me to this, and we saw Section 31 in the 2380s utilizing a Defiant Class starship, albeit a slightly modified one, for their own uses. Now, the Defiant Class ship has its own history, which we'll quickly review. The Defiant Class is officially classified as an escort ship, but unofficially is a warship. It was developed throughout the late 2360s after the Borg were encountered in 2365, and the Federation realized it was going to need a response. This was one of the projects that the Federation began to develop around that time. It was kicked into high gear after the devastating losses of the Battle of Wolf 359, and then Commander Benjamin Sisko became involved in the vessel's production. It was put to one side when the vessel, during its shakedown cruise, the original prototype, the USS Defiant, demonstrated it had some issues, and more pressing concerns of the Federation basically meant that they decided, we'll put this to one side, it's not really very important right now. The vessel had problems like not being able to achieve its maximum warp capability, powering up all of its systems to full made the vessel shake. In short, to quote Benjamin Sisko, it's overpowered for a ship of its size, and it nearly shakes itself apart when you try to use it properly. And it was eventually fixed after the encounters with the Dominion, after it demonstrated that it was actually a very effective vessel when utilized properly against an enemy like the Dominion. Starfleet put the ship into production. There are at least 18 known versions of this ship that have been seen, although very likely, as we don't often see the full size of Starfleet, there are very likely many more of them. The ship's overall capabilities are, including but not limited to, it is tactically extremely very effective with advanced shields and ablative hull armor. It is armed with 4 pulse phaser cannons, 3 phaser emitters, 2 forward and 2 aft torpedo launchers, and 1 sort of mega weapon, for lack of a better term, where it can fire its deflector dish as an entire module out as a sort of great big rocket in space with a high yield destructive potential. The vessels are of course used by Starfleet very extensively, but have also been seen in the Mirror Universe being used by the Terrans, and of course the one we are going to talk about when we finally get to it, an unmarked, unnamed Defiant Class ship utilized by Section 31. Now, although superficially this ship very much resembled a standard Defiant Class, I'm going to speculate that internally this ship's got some abilities and features that the USS Defiant did not have. I would hazard a guess that it's armed in basically the same way. It is also notable that only the USS Defiant and later the refitted USS, well, rather renamed USS Sao Paulo, which was renamed to the USS Defiant, were the only ships of this class to carry a cloaking device officially. This vessel utilized by Section 31, however, was also seen to utilize a cloaking device. Now, I am in no way shocked to learn that Section 31 uses cloaking devices. In fact, there's a very good theory to argue that the development of the interphasic cloaking device aboard the USS Pegasus likely had something to do with Section 31. If they weren't the ones behind the entire project, which I personally think they probably were, then they definitely knew about it, because there's no way, absolutely no way, that anyone within the Federation was able to develop such an advanced piece of kit without either their help or at least their knowledge. And I imagine once someone started to develop an interphasic cloak, that would be something that would definitely drag their attention. If only they want it for themselves, or potentially to preserve the peace, that Section 31 might actually step in and prevent the development of the technology, because it could potentially jeopardize the peace between the Federation and the Romulans. More likely, they'd want to continue the research, but covertly, and keep it for themselves and not widely used by Starfleet, which does pose the question, is this Section 31 ship utilizing an interphasic cloak? Because the technology was seen to work, it just wasn't very reliable. But by this point, it's had more than 30 years of potential development. They could have ironed out those bugs. I don't know if the ship possessed other Section 31 technology they're known to have had that was likely, interestingly, of Romulan origin, where they could use hollow emitters to project a different image around the ship, making it appear different, which again, if hypothetically this ship does have that, it might not be a Defiant class at all. It might have been just when it decloaked, it projected an image of a Defiant class, so that if anyone saw it, they'd just assume it's a Starfleet Defiant class, but it's a nasty, mean warship, so Federation or not, you're going to stay away from it. That is possible, although I don't think is likely. I think what we saw is actually what they have. I think they have a Defiant class ship. Which now brings me to my total speculation part. What the hell does Section 31 want with a Defiant class warship? They're not exactly an explorer. Now, Section 31 doesn't explore, but it certainly does do research and observation. A stealthy design, certainly. But quite frankly, the main thing about a Defiant class that makes it stealthy is the cloaking device. You could stick a cloaking device on a Nebula class and it becomes stealthy. So, why then a Defiant? It could be for the tactical capabilities, but Section 31, although does step in on a combat level on occasion, in the past was seen to do it, when you look at the vessels they used historically, even the one from a divergent timeline, the USS Vengeance, most of their ships, they're not built for pure combat. They have a combat element, and certainly the Vengeance was a dreadnought, it was a warship certainly, but the other vessels, they're not. And the Vengeance was never intended really to be a hidden ship, it was intended to be a visible vessel, a weapon to be utilized by the Federation Starfleet. So why then a Defiant class? And I honestly think it's purely for the tactical capabilities, because I think it's an indication that Section 31, at least behind the scenes, is becoming more involved, more active in its threat assessment and threat neutralization policies. If you ultimately have a job that needs doing, you need something destroying, not just a person eliminating or removing or disappearing, but a space station or a base or even a starship. You need to be able to kill it, and perhaps they can't rely on Starfleet necessarily to do that sometimes, because how could you? You could utilize third parties, like hire some Nausicaans or Orions to go and do it for you, but that runs a lot of risk. And its risk is not, I don't think, the business of Section 31. But a Defiant class is a very obviously Federation ship. It's a very obvious ship. And it's very distinctive, and everyone knows it. It's famed from the Dominion War. So it's an odd choice of vessel. There are a few notable, or at least one, I think, notable difference between this ship and a standard Defiant class that seem to be observed. Section 31 vessels tended to have darker hulls. They tended to be sort of a paint scheme of black. I don't actually think it's paint. I think it's whatever material they coat the hull with, and I don't think that's paint. I think on the old NX-01, it was probably paint. I don't think on this ship it's paint. If it's painted on like paint, it's very likely some kind of, I don't know, liquid polymer or some other metal which they have atomized and scattered on the hull. And in this case, it's black. So whatever you think, I mean, just to explore this, painting a ship black in space may be useful for a visual thing, but when you're talking about ships exchanging fire over many kilometers, Unless you've got natural zoom lenses in your eyes, you could paint the ship hot pink and you still wouldn't be able to see it. Even if the ship was a kilometre long, you wouldn't be able to see it at 50, 100, 1,000, a million kilometres away. It's too far. It wouldn't be reflecting enough light to be visible. And ships, although they do illuminate, they're not that visible. So actually painting the ship black, it only really serves a psychological effect of being stealthy. It's not really increasing the ship's stealth in any significant way. So the hull coloration being black serves a different purpose. It could be psychological. It more than likely has something to do with the metal being used, and a byproduct of that is making the hull darker, because realistically they would want this ship, if it is seen, to be simply mistaken for a Federation Defiant class. The only other distinctive difference between this ship you can see and a normal Defiant class is that it has no registry prefix, no name, which is again a standard thing with Section 31. They don't operate their ships like Starfleet do. Their ships are filled with not officers and crew, they're filled with operatives and administrators, technicians and other people, basically almost intelligence staff, not naval officers. But I want to hear everyone's speculation as to what exactly Section 31 is doing skulking around the galaxy with a Defiant class warship, and do you think they have more than one of them? Because again, just having a cloaking device is not a prerequisite. Defiant class ships as standard do not have cloaking devices. The Valiant didn't have one, the Sao Paulo didn't have one when initially seen, and as far as we can tell, none of the other ships in the fleet as standard carried them. Certainly they're a vessel that is compatible with cloaking technology, but we've also seen a Galaxy class ship utilize a cloak. We've seen an Oberth class ship utilize a cloak. Why not use a Prometheus class, for example? I'm sorry, but a Prometheus class I think is a tactically more advanced ship than a Defiant class. So why not that? Why not a Saber class? Why the Defiant? Why such an iconic ship? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you made it all to the end of the video, thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.